a woman's cry trembling through the silence. "Don't shoot," she said. "He's my brother." The sun bled across the desert sky, turning the horizon into a smear of red and gold. Ash Hollow, a small town on the edge of nowhere, sat quiet under the dying light. Dust drifted down the main street like lazy ghosts, and the wind carried the sound of a creaking saloon sign and the far-off cry of a hawk. Marshal Grant Avery stood outside the Copper Spur Saloon, thumbs hooked in his gun belt, eyes scanning the road. He'd spent 12 years keeping peace in Ash Hollow, a peace held together by worn leather, quick hands and silence. That evening, silence broke. A lone rider came from the west, tall, lean, wrapped in a dark duster coat, his hat pulled low. His horse looked half dead from the miles. The stranger didn't look like trouble at first glance, but Grant Avery had learned that trouble didn't always announce itself. Inside the saloon, the piano stopped. Conversation died mid-laugh. Everyone turned toward the window as the rider slowed to a halt in the middle of town. Grant took a step forward. "Evening, stranger. You're riding late for these parts." The man swung down from his saddle, dust falling from him in sheets. His face was hard, wind-burned, with eyes too old for his years. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He tossed it onto the porch. Grant crouched down, unwrapped it, and froze. Inside was a gold locket, bent and dirty from age. He opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny photo of a woman, her face soft, smiling, kind. Eliza Monroe, the blacksmith's daughter. Gone missing 2 years ago. Grant's voice hardened. "Where'd you get this?" The stranger's reply was rough, gravel low. "From a grave that don't belong to her." A murmur rippled through the street. Men looked at one another. The stranger turned and walked toward the saloon without another word. Before pushing open the doors, he said quietly, almost to himself, "Keep your gun close tonight, Marshal. They'll be coming for me." Then he disappeared into the darkness. That night, the wind changed. The town dogs barked restless. Lamps flickered in windows. Marshal Avery sat alone in his office, the gold locket glinting under lamplight. He'd searched for Eliza Monroe once, found nothing but sand, bones, and silence. He remembered her mother begging for justice. He'd promised he'd find the one responsible. That promise had turned to dust. Until now, the door creaked open. Deputy Nora Blake, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s with a scar across her cheek, stepped in. "Marshal," she said softly, "that drifter's still at the saloon. Won't say his name. Won't touch his whiskey." Grant holstered his revolver. "Then let's ask him why he's carrying ghosts in his pocket." They crossed the street together, boots crunching on gravel. The saloon was quiet when they entered. Too quiet. The piano man's hands hovered above the keys, waiting. The stranger sat alone in a corner booth, hat still low. His duster was thrown open now, revealing a revolver that had seen more blood than polish. He looked up slowly when the marshal and his deputy approached. "Name," Grant said. The man's eyes met his. Jonas Monroe." The name hit like a thunderclap. Grant felt his chest tighten. "Monroe, as in Eliza Monroe?" Jonas nodded. "She was my sister." Nora blinked. "She never mentioned a brother. She didn't know I was alive," Jonas said quietly. "My ma left me in Kansas when I was 6. Eliza stayed here with our pa. I found her name again only after I got out of Yuma prison." Grant's hand twitched near his belt. "Prison?" Jonas smiled faintly, a bitter, tired smile. "For something I didn't do. That's how I met the men who took her, and now they're coming for me." Before Grant could ask another word, a thunder of hooves rolled through the night. A sharp crack split the still air, a rifle shot. Then another. A lantern shattered outside and the street erupted in flames. Jonas's chair scraped back hard as he drew his revolver. They found me. Grant and Nora ran for the door. The air outside was red and smoke thick. Masked riders tore through Ash Hollow, firing shots, tossing torches, shouting curses that echoed off the hills. The marshal fired back, dropping one from his horse. Jonas stood beside him, calm as stone, firing with deadly precision. Every shot he made counted. Then one of the riders fell near the well, Morris, his mask slipping off. Grant's stomach twisted. It was Deputy Caleb Reeves, his own man. Jonas saw the shock on Grant's face. "Told you they'd be here," he said coldly. Grant's voice was hoarse. "Why, Caleb? What the hell is this?" Caleb's mouth twitched into a broken grin. Say it's bigger than you, Marshal. Say it's bigger than any of us. Then he coughed blood and died before answering. The riders fled into the hills, their torches fading into the night. Ash Hollow was left in ruins, smoke, fire, screams. Jonas holstered his gun, face grim. This is just the start. Grant turned to him, jaw set. Then start talking. Jonas looked toward the burning church where the bell had melted half from the heat. You ever heard of a man named Judge Carraway? Grant frowned. Used to hang outlaws for the territory. Died years back. Jonas's voice dropped to a whisper. He didn't die. He built an empire, and my sister found out what kind. He glanced toward the horizon. She found something she wasn't meant to see. And now they'll kill anyone who says her name. Grant's gaze hardened. Then they'll have to come through me. Jonas met his eyes. They will. Before the week's out, the flames behind them crackled like applause from hell itself, and somewhere in the night, a woman's voice cried out in the wind. Don't shoot! Morning came slow and heavy over Ash Hollow. The air still smelled of smoke and scorched wood. What was once a quiet frontier town now lay wounded. The church roof caved in, the general store blackened, and the main street littered with bullet casings and burned-out torches. Marshal Grant Avery stood in front of what remained of the sheriff's office, hat in hand, eyes dark with exhaustion. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the night pulling bodies from the rubble, tending to the wounded, counting the cost. 12 dead. 5 houses gone. And a truth he could no longer ignore. The town's peace had been bought with silence. Deputy Nora Blake stepped up beside him, her bandaged arm pressed to her side. Half the folks are packing up, she said quietly. They're leaving for Carson City by sundown. Grant's jaw tightened. They think running will save 'em. Maybe they're right, she said softly. He turned to her, eyes cold. And where do you think the fire came from, Nora? That wasn't random. Someone knew where to strike, what to burn. The Monroe's old house was the first to go. She looked down, ashamed. You think someone from town helped them? I don't think, he said. I know. From across the street, Jonas Monroe approached. The stranger no one had trusted 24 hours ago, now walking through the ashes like a ghost that refused to leave. He carried a small wooden box in his hands, something he'd dug up behind the burned-out church. Found this, he said quietly, setting it on the table in front of Grant. Grant opened it. Inside lay a rusted badge half melted by heat. It read, Deputy Marshal of the Territory of Arizona. Grant looked up slowly. Where the hell'd this come from? Jonas wiped the soot from his hands. From a grave. The same one I found that locket in. Only thing is, that grave wasn't for any lawman. He paused, eyes fixed on the horizon. That grave was my sister's. Nora frowned. You said it wasn't hers. It wasn't, Jonas said. But someone wanted us to think she was dead. That badge belonged to the man who helped her escape. Grant leaned forward. Escape what? Jonas hesitated, then spoke like every word cost him breath. Yuma Prison, Nora blinked. That's where you said you came from. He nodded. 3 years I rotted in there for a stagecoach robbery I never touched. Judge Carraway signed my sentence himself. But one night, there was a woman in the infirmary. She was sneaking medicine to prisoners. Said her name was Eliza, my sister. Grant's stomach dropped. She told me she'd found something in the judge's records, Jonas continued. Names, payments, lists of men who weren't supposed to be alive, and others who were executed before trial. She said the judge was running a business out of the gallows, selling men's freedom to the highest bidder. Nora's eyes widened. You're telling me Carraway's been hanging innocents and selling pardons, Jonas said bitterly, and when Eliza found out, he made sure her name disappeared too. Grant stepped back, staring at the smoldering town. You got proof? Jonas nodded once. A ledger. Carraway's own handwriting. Eliza said she'd hidden it, somewhere in Ash Hollow, before she came to get me out. Grant frowned. You're saying it's still here? Unless the fire burned it last night, Jonas said. But I doubt Carraway would risk destroying his own leverage. He'll send more men before he lets that book surface. The marshal crossed his arms. And what's he want with you? Jonas looked up at him, eyes like iron. I'm the only one who knows where she buried it. By noon, the townsfolk gathered at the church steps, faces pale with fear. Grant climbed the broken stairs, lifted his voice over the murmurs. Listen up. Those riders that hit us weren't bandits. They were lawmen, paid men. Someone powerful sent him to bury this town and everyone in it. But as long as I'm Marshal here, no man's hanging for silence." A voice from the crowd shouted back, "We ain't staying to die, Marshal. You saw what they did." Grant's tone turned sharp as steel. "If you leave now, they'll hunt you too. This ain't just about one woman. This is about every soul Judge Carraway's damned to keep himself rich." The crowd fell quiet. The wind kicked up dust between their boots. From behind the saloon, a horse neighed. Jonas appeared again, saddled up, rifle strapped across his back. "I'm riding out," he said. "Need to find the trail they came from." "Maybe pick up their camp." Grant stepped down, blocking his way. "Not without me, you ain't." Jonas stared at him, unreadable. "You sure you want to die for this, Marshal?" Grant smirked faintly. "I don't die easy." Nora stepped forward too, her eyes steady. "Then make room for three." For a moment, the three of them stood together, the outcast, the lawman, the scarred deputy, against a desert horizon that promised only blood and fire. Jonas tipped his hat, mounting up. "Then saddle up, Marshal. You're about to find out just how deep this goes." As they rode out past the burning edge of Ash Hollow, Grant glanced back once at the town, the smoke rising like ghosts into the pale morning sky. And in that moment, a strange thought crossed his mind. He could almost hear a woman's voice whisper through the wind, faint but clear. "Don't shoot! He's my brother." The desert stretched wide and endless, a sea of red sand and bones beneath a pitiless sun. 3 riders cut across it, Marshal Grant Avery, Deputy Nora Blake, and Jonas Monroe. The wind howled over the dunes, carrying the scent of sage and death. They'd been riding since dawn, following the faint tracks left by the masked riders who had burned Ash Hollow. The farther they went, the quieter it got, until even the horses seemed to breathe softer. Jonas rode ahead, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He hadn't spoken much since they left town, and Grant couldn't tell if the man was focused or haunted. Probably both. "You sure this is the way?" Grant called out. Jonas didn't look back. "I remember every dune. I buried her myself." Nora shivered despite the heat. "You buried your own sister?" Jonas' voice was rough. "Not her. What they wanted me to think was her. A body they left wearing her dress. Face burned so bad no one could tell. I thought she was gone till I found her locket. Clean, untouched, sitting on the grave. That's when I knew." Grant said nothing. He'd seen plenty of graves and plenty of lies, but something in Jonas's tone made his chest tighten. By midday they reached a stretch of cracked land, dotted with dried mesquite and the remains of an old campsite. Buzzards circled lazily above. Jonas pulled his horse to a stop near a low ridge. "This is it," he said. He slid off his saddle, knelt down and brushed the sand with his hand. The others followed, watching as he uncovered the faint outline of a wooden cross, its surface bleached white from the sun. The name carved into it was barely legible: Eliza Monroe. Jonas knelt there for a long moment, head bowed, lips pressed tight. Then he began digging with his hands. Grant moved beside him. "Easy, let me help." Together they unearthed a small box buried beneath the cross, old, cracked and wrapped in oilskin. Jonas brushed it clean, his fingers trembling slightly. "She said she'd leave a sign," he murmured. He opened it carefully. Inside lay a faded Bible, its cover nearly falling apart, and tucked between the pages was a folded piece of paper, sealed with wax. Grant broke the seal and unfolded it. The handwriting was delicate but hurried. Eliza's name signed at the bottom. "If you find this, I am not dead. They took me to the old mining compound north of Perdition Bluff. Judge Carraway is not who he claims. He sells justice to men who have none, trades freedom for gold and hangs those who get in the way. If I do not return, burn the ledgers. Don't trust anyone wearing a badge." Grant's throat went dry. He looked up slowly. "She's alive." Jonas's hands tightened into fists. "Then we ride north." Nora glanced toward the horizon. "That's 2 days' hard ride through bad land. You really think she's still there after all this time?" Jonas looked at her, eyes burning with something fierce. "If she ain't, then I'll bury whoever took her." Before Grant could answer, his horse snorted and stepped back nervously. The marshal turned to and saw movement on the ridge. Shadows, 3 of them, riders. Gunmetal flashed in the sunlight. "Down!" Grant shouted. The first shot split the air, kicking up dust near their boots. The second grazed Jonas's arm, tearing through his sleeve. He didn't flinch, just rolled for cover and fired back. Nora was faster, crouched behind a rock, rifle steady. Two on the ridge, one circling west, she called. Grant fired twice, dropping one rider clean off his horse. The others scattered, bullets whistling past. The fight lasted less than a minute, the sound of thunder fading across the dunes, then silence again. Jonas wiped blood from his arm. Caraway's scouts. He knows we're close. Grant walked to the fallen rider and knelt beside him. The man wore a deputy's badge. Not from Ash Hollow, from Carson County. Grant held it up. He's using the law to do his killing. Jonas spat in the sand. Law died a long time ago. They buried the man where he fell. When they mounted up again, the sun was beginning to drop, throwing long shadows across the sand. Grant tucked Eliza's letter into his coat pocket, its words burning into his mind. As they rode north, the sky deepened to red. The air cooled, the wind picking up. And somewhere far ahead, past the jagged silhouettes of Perdition Bluff, a thin column of smoke rose into the air. Nora spotted it first. Campfire. Jonas narrowed his eyes. Our signal. Grant gripped the reins tighter. Either way, that's where we're going. The last light faded and stars blinked awake over the desert. None of them spoke. The only sound was the soft rhythm of hooves and the whisper of wind through the sand. But as they rode into the dark, a strange unease settled in Grant's gut, like a whisper behind his ear. Eliza's letter said, "Don't trust anyone wearing a badge." He looked at the glint of metal on his own chest, then at Nora's, then at the badge on the dead man's vest behind them. And for the first time in years, Marshal Grant Avery wondered if he'd become the very thing Eliza Monroe feared most. By the time the three riders reached Perdition Bluff, the sun had already bled away behind the rocks. The land here was cruel, all sharp ridges and broken stone, a place where even the wind seemed afraid to linger. The old mining compound stood like a skeleton against the horizon, black timbers, rusted tracks, and the twisted remains of an ore cart half buried in the sand. Marshal Grant Avery reined in his horse at the edge of the ravine, scanning the place with narrowed eyes. "Not a soul in sight," he murmured. Deputy Nora Blake swung down first, her rifle ready. "Doesn't mean no one's watching." Jonas Monroe stayed in the saddle a moment longer, his gaze fixed on the collapsed mine shaft below. This is where they brought her. I can feel it. They tied off their horses in the shadows and made their way down the rocky path. The ground was littered with scraps, burned canvas, broken bottles, and boot prints half swallowed by dust. Jonas crouched beside one of them, tracing the outline with his finger. "Fresh," he said. "Less than a day old." Grant's jaw tightened. "Then whoever's here ain't far." They reached the mouth of the mine. A chill seeped from within, damp and stale. A rusted lantern hung from a post nearby, still warm to the touch. Someone had been there not long ago. Jonas lit it with a match, the glow flickering over the rock walls. Inside, the tunnel stretched deep and crooked, leading into blackness. Nora swallowed hard. "Looks like a snake's den." Jonas stepped forward without hesitation. "Then let's wake the snake." They moved cautiously through the tunnel, boots crunching on gravel. The air smelled of rust, sweat, and something else, something sour like decay. Grant's hand never left his revolver. Every echo sounded like footsteps. Halfway in, they found signs of habitation, bedrolls, tin plates, whiskey bottles, a makeshift camp carved into the belly of the mine. And there, hanging on the wall, was something that made Grant stop cold. A woman's shawl, blue, torn at the edge, and beneath it, carved into the timber with a knife, were three words: "He is innocent." Jonas stared at it, voice breaking. Her handwriting. Nora looked around the camp, rifle raised. "Then where is she?" Before anyone could answer, a noise echoed from the tunnel behind them, faint at first, then louder. Footsteps. Grant doused the lantern and motioned for silence. The three pressed against the wall, guns drawn. The footsteps drew closer. Slow, deliberate. A shadow appeared in the mouth of the tunnel. A man holding a rifle. His badge glinted in the low light. "Marshal Avery," the man's voice called. "Name's Deputy Pike, Carson County. Judge Caraway sent us ahead. We're here to help." Grant exchanged a look with Jonas. A cold, silent warning. Jonas whispered, "Don't trust him." "Caraway doesn't send help. He sends hunters." Pike stepped into the light, smiling nervously. "Heard there was an outlaw traveling with you. Monroe, right? We've got orders to bring him in alive." Grant's hand hovered near his gun. "You traveling alone?" Pike grinned. Not exactly. From the shadows behind him, 4 more men emerged, rifles leveled, faces hard. Nora cursed under her breath. Ambush! Grant fired first. His shot dropped the nearest man before the echo even died. Jonas rolled across the dirt, firing twice in quick rhythm. Sparks flashed, smoke filled the air, and the tunnel came alive with thunder. Nora ducked behind a crate, reloading fast. "They're trying to pin us in." Jonas shouted, "Fall back! There's another exit deeper inside." Grant covered them as they ran. Bullets tore through wood, stone, and shadow. The deeper they went, the colder the air grew until the light behind them faded completely. Then, in the darkness, Nora's hand brushed against something, a lantern. She lit it, and its glow revealed a small chamber carved into the rock. At its center was a wooden door chained shut, and nailed to it a single scrap of paper. Grant pulled it free. It was written in the same delicate handwriting. "They're using the mine to hide them, the ones they took. I can still hear them at night. Tell Jonas I never stopped believing." Jonas's throat tightened. "She's alive," Nora turned to him. "But where the hell are they keeping her?" Before anyone could answer, an explosion rocked the tunnel, the entrance collapsing in a roar of dust and flame. The sound was deafening. Grant hit the ground hard, ears ringing. He looked up through the haze. The exit was gone, buried under tons of rock. Jonas coughed, wiping blood from his forehead. "They sealed us in." Grant struggled to his feet, gripping the lantern. "Then we find another way out, and we make 'em pay for it." The flame flickered, throwing their shadows huge and trembling against the walls. As they moved deeper into the black, the air grew colder, and faintly through the echo of dripping water came something else, a voice, a woman's voice, soft, crying, "Don't shoot. He's my brother." Jonas froze where he stood, lantern trembling in his hand. Grant turned slowly toward him. "You hear that?" Jonas's face was pale as bone. That was her. The echoes of the explosion still rolled through the tunnels when the whisper faded into silence. Dust hung thick in the air, drifting like fog around the flickering lantern. Marshal Grant Avery steadied himself, ears still ringing. "That voice, it came from ahead," he said quietly. Jonas Monroe stood frozen, every muscle tight. It was her, Eliza. I'd know that voice anywhere. Deputy Nora Blake checked her rifle, glancing toward the dark tunnel. "Then we're walking straight into whatever hell Cowboy built down here." The 3 moved forward cautiously, lantern light spilling across rough rock and rusted rails. The deeper they went, the colder it grew, air thick with damp earth and the faint metallic tang of blood. They passed through a narrow shaft and entered a wider chamber, lined with wooden beams that creaked under their own age. There were shackles bolted to the walls, and bones scattered beneath them. Nora's breath hitched. "Good Lord, what did they do here?" Grant bent down and lifted a broken tag from the ground, a small piece of tin stamped with a number. Prisoners, not miners. This wasn't a camp. It was a graveyard. Jonas moved to one of the walls, his lantern revealing faint writing scratched into the wood. Still waiting for dawn. He swallowed hard. "Eliza used to say that when we were kids. When Pa would go off to fight and we'd wait for morning." Grant looked at him. Then she was here. A sudden noise made them all whirl around, the clang of chains from the dark end of the tunnel. Nora aimed her rifle. "Show yourself!" From the shadows stepped a man as gaunt, filthy, eyes sunken deep. He raised trembling hands. "Don't shoot, please. You're not with them, are you?" Grant lowered his gun slightly. "Who are you?" The man coughed hard, his voice a rasp. "Name's Tate. I worked the mines here before Cowboy took over. Thought he was reopening it for gold, but he was running a prison. Folks he didn't like, folks who knew too much." Jonas stepped closer. "A woman, Eliza Monroe." "Was she here?" Tate nodded weakly. "Aye, pretty thing with fire in her eyes. She kept us alive, prayed with us, smuggled water when she could. But Cowboy found out, took her up to the upper shaft. Said he'd make an example." Jonas's fists clenched. "When?" "2 days ago. Maybe 3. Grant exchanged a look with Nora. "Then she could still be alive." Tate grabbed Grant's arm. "You don't understand. There's something else down here. They call it the pit. They throw the ones who don't die fast enough down there." The man's eyes went wide, his voice breaking into a whisper. "You can hear them sometimes. Talking to each other in the dark." Jonas frowned. "What are you talking about?" Before he could finish, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep rumble rolled through the walls. Stones rained from above. Grant pulled Tate aside. "What is that?" Tate's face turned ashen. "The pit, it's waking up." A faint chorus of moans echoed from deeper in the shaft. Soft, ragged, and horribly human. Nora's hand shook. "We need to move," Grant nodded. "Which way to the upper shaft?" Tate pointed toward a narrow passage climbing steeply upward. "Follow that, but be careful." Caraway left guards near the lift. "They don't take prisoners alive." Jonas crouched, grabbing the lantern. "Then we ain't giving them the chance." They moved fast, Tate limping behind them. The tunnel twisted and climbed, each step bringing the smell of smoke and gunpowder. The moaning grew louder below, echoing up through the stone like ghosts trying to reach daylight. Finally, they emerged into a larger chamber lit by a single oil lamp. An old elevator cage stood in the center, its chains leading up into blackness. Grant tested the crank. "Still works." Jonas glanced around. "You two go first." "I'll cover the rear." Nora frowned. "You think we'll just leave you?" "Not leaving. Just making sure we ain't followed." Before Grant could argue, gunfire erupted from the tunnel they came through. Bullets tore into the rock, sparks flying. Nora fired back, hitting one of Caraway's men square in the chest. Grant shouted, "Go now!" They piled into the lift, Grant, Nora, Tate, while Jonas cranked the lever. The chain groaned and the platform began to rise, creaking and swaying as the gunfire echoed below. Grant leaned over the edge. "Jonas, come on!" Jonas fired one last round, then leapt and grabbed the edge of the cage as it rose. His boots dangled over the void for a heartbeat before Grant pulled him up. The cage rattled to a stop near the top. They stepped off onto a wooden platform overlooking a massive cavern, and there, standing in the center, illuminated by firelight, was Judge Caraway. His coat was spotless, his badge gleaming, and beside him stood Eliza Monroe, her wrists bound, face pale, eyes full of defiance. Jonas froze. "Eliza!" She looked at him, tears shining. "Jonas, no! Don't!" Caraway raised his revolver and smiled coldly. "Marshal Avery, glad you finally joined us. You've brought the law into my house. So now you'll watch it die here." He aimed and fired. The shot rang through the cavern like thunder. The shot cracked like lightning through the cavern. Jonas ducked. The bullet ripped past his shoulder and struck the wooden beam behind him. Splinters flew. Marshal Grant Avery fired back instantly, his revolver echoing off the rock walls. Judge Silas Caraway stepped behind a pillar, dragging Eliza Monroe with him, her wrists bound tight. "Drop your guns." Caraway's voice thundered across the chamber. "Or the girl dies right where she stands." Jonas froze, chest heaving. "Don't you touch her." Caraway laughed. "Touch her? I made her the reason half my men stayed loyal." "Hope's a dangerous thing to sell, Mr. Monroe." Grant slowly lowered his gun, eyes scanning the shadows. 4 armed guards had appeared at the judge's sides, rifles trained on them. Nora stood still beside Grant, rifle half raised, waiting for his cue. Grant's mind raced. They were surrounded, and Eliza, she looked weak, beaten, but her eyes burned with that same stubborn fire Jonas had spoken of. Caraway stepped forward, his polished boots clicking on the rock. "Marshal Avery," he said, voice smooth as oil. "You and I are men of order. We keep peace in places that forgot what peace means. So tell me, what's one outlaw's life worth against the law itself?" Grant stared at him. "You don't know a damn thing about the law." "Oh, I know it better than most." Caraway smiled thinly. "The law's what men believe it is. It's paper and fear. And when both burn, only power remains." He motioned toward Jonas. "That man killed 2 of my deputies. You brought him here to face judgment, and I'll see to it he hangs before dawn." Jonas stepped forward, rage shaking his voice. "You framed me. You burned Ash Hollow yourself." Caraway's expression didn't change. "History belongs to whoever survives to write it." Then he turned to Eliza, voice dropping to a whisper everyone could still hear. "Tell them, my dear. Tell them what you did." Eliza's lips trembled. "Don't make me—" "Tell them." She closed her eyes, tears cutting through the dirt on her face. "He's telling the truth," she whispered. "Judge Caraway runs a trade, prisoners for gold. He sells them to the territories, calls it justice." Grant felt a cold wave roll through him. "You son of a—" Before he could move, Caraway fired again, this time into the ceiling. Dust and splinters rained down. You've already lost, Marshal. My men control every way out of this mine. You want the girl? Trade your badge. Grant's hand twitched near his revolver. You want my badge? Carraway grinned. Throw it at my feet. Show me you understand who makes the law now. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was dripping water and the faint rattle of Eliza's chains. Then, slow and steady, Grant reached up, unclipped his badge, and held it out. Nora's eyes widened. Grant. He tossed it to the ground. The metal rang sharp against the stone. Carraway smirked. Good. Maybe there's hope for you yet, Grant nodded slightly. Maybe. Then he moved. His revolver came up in a blur, one shot then another. The first hit the lantern beside Carraway, shattering it and plunging half the cavern into darkness. The second took down one of the guards. Nora opened fire, her rifle barking thunder. Sparks lit the blackness. Jonas charged forward, tackling one of Carraway's men into the rocks. Eliza dropped low, kicking her captor's knee out from under him. "Jonas!" she screamed. He dove toward her, cutting through her bindings with the guard's own knife. "Got you," he said, pulling her to her feet. "Not yet," she whispered. "We have to get out." Grant and Nora fought their way across the chamber. Bullets whined through the air. One caught Nora's sleeve. Another grazed Grant's hat clean off. Carraway's voice echoed from the shadows. "You can't kill me, Avery. I am the law." Grant ducked behind a beam, reloading. His voice came low and steady. "Then it's time the law learned how to bleed." He fired. The shot hit Carraway's shoulder, spinning him back. The judge dropped to one knee, clutching the wound, fury twisting his face. Jonas grabbed Eliza's hand. "Come on." They ran toward the lift, but just as they reached it, a shot rang out. Jonas felt something hot tear across his side. He stumbled, gasping, "Jonas!" Eliza cried, catching him before he fell. Grant turned at the sound. His heart sank. "Nora! Get them up top!" She nodded, firing one last round before sprinting to the crank. The lift groaned to life, rising slowly as Carraway's men regrouped below. Carraway staggered forward, gun in hand, blood running down his arm. "You think you can leave, Avery? You think you can walk away from me?" Grant met his eyes, cold as steel. "Watch me." The lift rose out of sight, the cavern echoing with gunfire and fury. When they reached daylight, the world felt too bright, the desert wind sharp and clean against their faces. Eliza pressed her hand to Jonas's wound, voice trembling. "You're going to be all right," he smiled weakly. "You always say that." Behind them, smoke began rising from the mine. Grant looked back once. "He'll follow." Nora reloaded her rifle. "Then we end it where it started," the marshal nodded. "Ash Hollow." Eliza turned toward him, her eyes fierce again. "If we go back there, people are going to die." Grant met her gaze. "They already have." The desert never forgot blood. By the time Marshal Grant Avery, Jonas Monroe, Eliza Monroe, and Deputy Nora Blake reached Ash Hollow, the wind had already swept away every footprint but theirs. The town looked half dead under the grey morning sky, windows boarded, doors hanging from hinges, the main street lined with ghosts of what once was. Smoke from the mine still smeared the horizon. Grant's shirt was torn, hat dusted white, and his eyes carried that distant, cold look of a man who's seen too much fire to ever see peace again. Nora dismounted first. "Place looks worse than when we left." Grant nodded slowly. "Because now they know we're coming." Eliza helped Jonas down from his horse. His wound had been wrapped tight, but blood still seeped through the bandage. "You shouldn't have ridden," she whispered. Jonas tried to smile through the pain. "If I stayed behind, you'd just come back for me." "Don't pretend otherwise." Eliza gave him a look, half anger, half love, and glanced around the silent street. "Where is everyone?" A door creaked open across the way. An old man stepped out holding a shotgun. His eyes widened when he saw them. "Marshal Avery?" "Thought you were dead." Grant's hand hovered near his holster. "Not yet. Where's the judge's men?" The old man spat in the dirt. "Left before dawn. Headed this way, I reckon. Heard Carraway's been bleeding and raging since last night." Jonas groaned softly. "Then he's coming for us." Grant looked toward the saloon at the end of the street, its sign swaying in the wind. "Then we make our stand here." Inside, the saloon was dark and dusty, the air heavy with the scent of spilled whiskey and wood rot. Broken chairs littered the floor. The piano in the corner sat silent, Keys yellowed with age. Nora checked the windows. "We've got one way in and one out." "That enough for you?" Grant nodded. "It'll have to be." Eliza tied her hair back, her hands shaking just slightly. "You can't fight him and his men head on." "There's too many." Grant didn't answer. He was staring at something on the wall, a framed map of the town. His eyes lingered on the mine routes branching beneath it. "Maybe we don't have to. Those tunnels under the town connect straight to the bluff. If we can block them off, we trap them before they reach the main street." Nora frowned. "That's suicide, Grant. You go down there, you'll be buried with them." Grant gave her a tired smile. "Wouldn't be the first time." Before Eliza could speak, Jonas stepped forward, pain shadowing his face but voice steady. "I'll go." "No," Grant said. "You can barely stand." Jonas looked him dead in the eye. "Then you'll have to shoot me to stop me." A tense silence filled the room. Grant finally sighed. "Fine, but we do it my way." He turned to Nora. "Get the old man and anyone left in town. Barricade the street. When you hear the first shot, light the fuse on that dynamite you found at the depot." Nora swallowed. "You sure about this?" Grant's jaw tightened. Not even a little. Hours later, the horizon burned with dust. Caraway's riders appeared like storm clouds. 20 men armed and ready, the judge himself leading from the front. His arm was bound in a sling, but his eyes were wild with fury. He rode into town slow, savoring every echo of his horse's hooves. "Avery," he shouted. "You can't hide from justice forever." From the saloon balcony, Grant stepped out, rifle in hand. "Then come and take it." Caraway smiled thinly. "Gladly." He raised his arms and his men charged. Gunfire exploded down the street. Windows shattered, dust kicked up, and the echoes rolled through town like thunder. Nora and the townsfolk fired from behind barrels and fences, each shot answering another. Meanwhile, beneath the ground, Grant and Jonas moved through the tunnels, lighting fuse cords along the walls. The air down there was damp and tight, the echoes of battle faint but steady. Jonas checked his pocket watch. "You sure this'll hold?" Grant lit another fuse. "It doesn't have to hold. It just has to end." Above them, the gunfire grew closer. Nora's voice could be heard shouting orders. "Hold the line! Don't let them through!" Grant and Jonas reached the final chamber, the same one they'd found before, where the mine split into 2 tunnels. Grant placed the last of the dynamite there, his movements precise, then faintly a sound. Bootsteps. He turned. Gun raised and Toulman froze. It was Deputy Nora Blake, but her rifle wasn't aimed at the judge's men. It was aimed at Grant. "Put it down," she said quietly. Jonas stared at her, disbelief on his face. "Nora, what are you doing?" Her eyes glistened, voice trembling but cold. "You think I didn't know what Caraway was? I was his inside hand. He promised me a marshal's badge, a real one. I just had to make sure you didn't live long enough to wear yours." Grant's voice dropped to a growl. "You sold your soul for a badge?" She hesitated, jaw tightening. "I sold it for survival." Jonas shook his head. "Then you'll die with the rest of them." Nora's finger tightened on the trigger, but before she could fire, the rumble of hooves echoed above. A blast from the street shook the tunnel walls. The dynamite fuse sparked. Grant's eyes widened. "Jonas, get down!" The explosion hit like a freight train. Fire tore through the tunnels, swallowing light, sound, and everything in between. When the smoke cleared, the mine had collapsed. The street above was a smoking ruin. Caraway's men scattered or dead. Nora was gone. Grant crawled from the rubble, coughing, dirt and blood on his face. Jonas stumbled beside him, half carrying Eliza, who had run down when the gunfire stopped. She looked around at the wreckage, eyes wide with horror. "Is it over?" Grant looked toward the burning horizon and the dark silhouette riding away through the smoke. Caraway, still alive. Grant's voice came low and steady. "Not yet." The dawn came slow and grey, spilling over a land scorched by gunfire and smoke. Ash Hollow lay silent behind them, half buried in dust, half broken by war. Marshal Grant. Avery stood at the edge of the ruins, one arm bound, his eyes fixed on the faint trail of hoofprints leading into the desert. Behind him, Jonas Monroe sat on a crate, his wound freshly bandaged. Eliza Monroe beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. "He's still out there," Grant said quietly. Eliza looked up. "Then let him go, Grant. Haven't we lost enough?" Grant didn't answer. His hat shadowed his face, but his jaw was tight. He won't stop. Not till he's buried everyone who stood against him. That includes you, me, and this whole damn town. Jonas groaned as he stood, clutching his side. Then we finish it, together. Eliza grabbed his arm. No, Jonas, please, you've done enough. Let the law handle it. Grant gave a low, bitter laugh. The law? The law's buried under that mine, Eliza. All that's left is us. For a long moment, only the wind spoke. Then Grant mounted his horse, a tired grey stallion with dust-caked mane, and turned toward the horizon. He's heading east toward Dry Mesa. If we ride hard, we can catch him by sundown. Jonas mounted up beside him, pale but determined. Then what are we waiting for? Eliza stared at them both, tears threatening her eyes. You'll die out there. Grant tipped his hat. Maybe. But if we don't ride, more folks will. He turned his horse and spurred forward. Jonas followed. Eliza stood there watching them disappear into the desert, her voice breaking into the wind. Come back to me. The desert stretched endless and cruel, a sea of red and gold under the burning sun. The two riders moved like ghosts, silent except for the rhythmic thud of hooves and the faint creak of leather. They'd been riding for hours before Grant finally spoke. Back there when the mine blew, you could have left. No one would have blamed you. Jonas wiped the sweat from his brow. Would have been easier. But I couldn't leave her again. Not after what they did. Grant nodded. She's strong. Takes after you. Jonas chuckled weakly. She takes after Ma. I just got the stubborn part. They rode on in silence for a while longer. Then Grant pointed to the horizon. There! A thin trail of dust rose in the distance, one lone rider cutting across the flats. Caraway. Grant's grip tightened on his reins. He's running for the canyons. If he reaches them, we'll lose him. Jonas's jaw clenched. Then we don't let him. They urged their horses faster, the world around them blurring into heat and grit. The sun climbed higher, baking the land. Every breath burned. Caraway looked back once, his silhouette sharp against the glare, and fired his pistol. The shot went wide, but the message was clear. He wasn't done fighting. Grant's voice was steady. Keep low. We'll flank him. Jonas nodded, circling left. The chase tore across the plains, 3 men bound by vengeance and fate. Dust rose like storm clouds behind them, and the echo of gunfire rolled across the land. At last they reached the edge of Dry Mesa Canyon, a jagged cut of stone, plunging hundreds of feet below. Caraway's horse stumbled to a stop, nostrils flaring. The judge turned wild-eyed, blood seeping through his bandaged arm. It's over, Grant shouted, reining in his horse a few yards away. Caraway laughed, a sound half mad, half defiant. Over? You still think there's an end to this, Avery? There's always another man to hang, another law to twist. Jonas rode up beside Grant, revolver raised. You're done, Caraway. You hear me? Done, Caraway sneered. You think killing me makes you better? Makes you clean. You burned a town to save your sister, outlaw. You're no different than me. Jonas's hand shook, but his aim never wavered. Maybe not. But I ain't the one wearing a badge. Caraway's grin widened. You think she'll forgive you when she learns the truth? Grant frowned. What truth? The judge's eyes gleamed. Ask him what really happened the night her father died. Jonas froze. You shut your damn mouth. Grant looked at him. Jonas, what's he talking about? Jonas's voice broke. It was an accident, Grant. Our pa, he tried to stop me from running off with the gang. We fought. The gun went off, Eliza. She never knew. Caraway chuckled even as blood dripped down his chin. The outlaw who killed his own father. The sister who worships a lie. Poetic, ain't it? Jonas's eyes filled with tears, rage boiling beneath them. I don't get to say her name. He fired. The bullet hit Caraway square in the chest. The judge stumbled back, the shock frozen on his face, then fell into the canyon below, his scream swallowed by the wind. Silence. Grant exhaled slowly, lowering his gun. It's done. Jonas sat there, breathing hard, staring at the canyon edge. No, it'll never be done. Grant looked at him, seeing the hollow look of a man who'd carried too much for too long. Let's go home, he said quietly. Jonas nodded weakly, turning his horse. Yeah, home. As they rode away, the sun began to set, the sky painted red, like the end of an old war. And somewhere far behind them, down in that canyon where the judge fell, the wind whispered through the rocks, soft and almost human. Don't shoot, it said. He's my brother." By the time Grant Avery and Jonas Monroe rode back into Ash Hollow, the sun was bleeding out behind the mountains. The town looked even smaller now. Just a handful of buildings still standing, smoke curling lazily from the smoldering wreckage of the mine. The people who survived were out on the main street, burying the dead. The wind carried the sound of shovels against dry earth, steady, hollow, and final. Eliza Monroe looked up when she heard the hooves. Her face was streaked with dirt and dried tears, her hands raw from digging. When she saw them, she ran forward, her heart pounding. "Jonas!" He barely had time to dismount before she threw her arms around him. He winced from the pain but held her tight. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. Grant looked away, giving them that quiet space only a man who's lost too much understands. He turned to the townsfolk. "Caraway's gone," he said simply. A ripple went through the crowd. Some gasped, others bowed their heads. The old man from the general store spat in the dirt and muttered, "Good riddance," but there wasn't any cheer. No celebration, just silence, the kind that follows too much killing. Later that night, a small fire burned in front of the saloon. Grant, Eliza, and Jonas sat around it, the flames flickering over tired faces. Eliza's voice was quiet. "So it's over then?" Grant poked at the fire with a stick. "Maybe for the town. Not for us." Jonas stared into the flames. His hand trembled slightly. "She needs to know, Grant." Grant looked at him, eyes shadowed. "You sure?" Jonas nodded slowly. "She deserves the truth. No more lies." He turned to his sister. His voice cracked. "Eliza, I need to tell you what really happened that night. Tonight Pa died." Her brows furrowed. "Jonas, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," he interrupted, voice raw. "He wasn't killed by bandits. It was me. We fought. I was drunk, angry, stupid." The gun went off. "I tried to run, but I couldn't live with it. Not after what I did." The fire popped. Eliza just stared at him, frozen. "You're lying." "I wish I was." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she stood and walked away, tears streaking down her cheeks. Grant watched her go, then looked at Jonas. "You did right telling her. Might not seem like it now, but someday she'll see it." Jonas gave a broken laugh. "Don't think I'll be around to see that day." Grant leaned back, eyes on the stars. "You're still breathing. That's something." By morning, Eliza was gone. All she left was a folded note on the table inside the saloon, the paper smudged with tears and dirt. Grant found it first. He read it silently, jaw tightening, then handed it to Jonas. "Jonas, I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet, but you're still my brother. Pa wouldn't have wanted us to die hating each other. Maybe someday we'll find peace. Until then, I need to go where no one knows my name." Eliza Jonas crumpled the note in his hand, eyes hollow. "She's gone because of me." Grant placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, she's gone because she needs to heal." "You both do," Jonas looked up. "What about you?" Grant gave a small, tired smile. "The badge don't mean much anymore. Maybe I'll stay a while, help rebuild what's left." Jonas stared at him, then nodded. "Then I'll stay too." Grant shook his head. "You've got nothing left to prove, son. Go find her. Tell her you ain't done yet." Jonas hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You sure?" Grant stood looking toward the dusty horizon. "Yeah, maybe it's time someone else carried the weight." An hour later, Jonas rode out of Ash Hollow, the rising sun painting the sky gold. He didn't know where Eliza had gone, only that the trail led east toward the high plains. Grant watched him disappear into the distance. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and smoke. He looked down at the old marshal's badge in his hand, its surface dull and scratched from years of wear. He turned it over once, then pinned it back to his coat. "Guess I ain't done either," he muttered. Then he walked back into the empty street, toward the sound of hammers and rebuilding, a town that had bled, but wasn't ready to die. The prairie stretched wide and golden under the morning sun. Jonas Monroe rode alone, his horse's hooves thudding soft against the dry earth. The wind carried the smell of grass and dust, and somewhere far behind him lay the ashes of Ash Hollow, a town reborn from blood. He hadn't slept in 2 days. The weight of what he'd done, always, and what he'd lost, sat heavy on his shoulders. But he kept riding east. He didn't know where Eliza had gone exactly, only that she'd taken the wagon road toward the high plains. He followed every sign he could find, a half-buried hoofprint, a scrap of cloth caught on a fence post, a burned-out campfire under a mesquite tree. Each clue was a reminder. She wasn't gone. Not yet. By the second evening he found her. She was camped near a dry riverbed, the orange light of her small fire flickering against the twilight. Her horse grazed nearby. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders drawn, her face turned toward the sky like she was waiting for an answer that wouldn't come. Jonas stopped a few yards away, too scared to speak. The words he'd rehearsed on the long ride all vanished. Eliza turned first. She didn't reach for her gun, didn't even flinch. She just stared at him, eyes rimmed red. "You followed me." Jonas swallowed hard. Had to. Couldn't leave things like they were. She looked back at the fire. "You could have. Most men would have." Jonas stepped closer, hat in hand. "I ain't most men. You're my blood. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Hell, I don't even expect it. But I had to see you one more time. Had to tell you that every mile I've ridden since that night, I've carried him with me. And you." Eliza's jaw trembled. "You think sorry fixes it?" "No," Jonas said softly. "But maybe it's a start." The silence between them stretched. The only sound was the fire crackling and the wind sweeping through the tall grass. Finally, Eliza spoke. "I wanted to hate you. God knows I tried, but when I heard that explosion back in town, when I thought you'd died down there, it felt like losing him all over again." Jonas lowered his head, voice rough. "You didn't lose him. You just got stuck carrying the pain he left behind. Same as me." She looked at him, tears finally falling. "I don't know how to move on." He smiled faintly. "Then don't, not yet. Just ride a while. Keep breathing. The rest'll come when it's ready." Eliza studied him for a long moment, then stepped forward and hugged him. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something close. For the first time in years, Jonas didn't feel like running. They rode back together the next morning, slow, side by side, saying little. When the sun rose higher, they stopped on a ridge overlooking the plains. In the far distance, smoke curled from the rebuilt chimneys of Ash Hollow. Eliza shaded her eyes. "You think the town will make it?" Jonas nodded. "They've been through worse. Folks like that don't break easy." She smiled faintly. "And Grant?" Jonas chuckled. "He's too stubborn to die. Probably already bossing the carpenters around." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that comes after too much pain, too much silence. As they sat there, Eliza reached into her satchel and pulled out their father's old revolver, the same one that ended his life. She looked at it for a long moment, then placed it gently on the ground. "No more of this," she said. Jonas nodded. "No more." He picked up a handful of dirt and poured it over the gun. The soil swallowed it, leaving only a faint glint of metal beneath the earth. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of sage and smoke. And something else too. Faint but real. Hope. When they rode back into Ash Hollow 3 days later, the town looked different. Children played in the street. Men hammered planks into new door frames. Women carried water and bread to the workers. And at the end of the road, standing tall and proud with his badge shining once more, was Marshal Grant Avery. He looked up as they approached, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You two look like hell." Eliza laughed through her tears. "You should see the other guy," Grant grinned. "Glad you're back." "We could use more hands," Jonas nodded. "You got 'em." Grant clapped him on the shoulder, then turned to watch the sun setting over the town, gold light spilling across rooftops and dust, turning everything soft and alive. "You know," he said quietly, "out here every man's got blood on his hands. But it ain't the killing that defines you. It's what you build after." Jonas followed his gaze, eyes narrowing against the light. "Then let's start building." Eliza smiled, the first true smile in years, and together they walked down the main street, brother, sister, and lawman, into a future no longer bound by the past. And as the wind swept across Ash Hollow, carrying away the last ashes of yesterday, the town stood tall once more. Epilogue, Ash Hollow 1 year later. The saloon was open again. The piano played every evening. Children ran through the street, while Grant Avery sat on the porch, polishing his badge. Down by the edge of town, Jonas and Eliza worked the small farm they'd built from the old homestead ruins, side by side, quiet, but at peace. Life wasn't easy. It never would be. But for the first time, it was theirs. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unforgettable tales from me. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. Thanks for watching.